Can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming,
whose broad stripes
and bright stars bursting in air gave proof through the night
that our flag was still there.
Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Let's give a hand to the Doo-Wop Boys. Give a hand to the Doo-Wop Boys. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is L. Londell McMillan, and I thank you for your time in coming out this morning on a Saturday morning. Let's give one more hand to the Doo-Wop Boys, if you don't mind, please. Thank you. Wonderful. This is our future. God bless y'all. This morning we are very fortunate to have two distinguished members of the Congressional Black Caucus here. One from the great state of California, where we know Michael Jackson resided and his family resides, Congresswoman Diane E. Watson from the 33rd District of California. And she will be bringing you greetings, along with my Congresswoman on the opposite coast, Congresswoman Yvette Clarke from the great borough of Brooklyn, New York, who's here in the house. So as you see, from California to Brooklyn, New York, we've got a coast-to-coast representation of great legislators that are here to pay their respects and share some words with us, and they've convened this opportunity for us to have this illustrious panel of great thinkers, leaders, motivators, and business people around music, art, and culture to discuss Michael Jackson, a legend in life and death. So at this time, I'd like to bring to the podium first Congresswoman Diane Watson, followed by Congresswoman Yvette Clarke. Thank you.
A big hand for Londell Martin, please. Big hand. The publisher of The Source. Good afternoon. When you were looking at the Doo-Wop Boys, did you see something building from the legacy of the one we're here to memorialize and to focus on for what he has left for all of us? Let's give a big hand of encouragement to the Doo-Wop Boys. I'm Congresswoman Diane Watson, representing the 33rd Congressional District in California. That's Los Angeles, Hollywood, and Culver City. As I travel the world, I introduce myself, you know, Diane Watson from Los Angeles, California, and people nod. But when I say Hollywood, everyone smiles. And so we want to talk about a young man and his family that really represented what the essence of creativity, talent, skill, precision that could reach around this globe 100 times. That's who Michael Jackson was. We want to focus on one in a family. There were 9 children, and Michael was one of the younger ones. And as you know, he started very early on. And one of the things that he always regretted in his short life is that he never got a chance to be a child. All of us need to go through a developmental process where we have the choice to be carefree, the choice to play, the choice to be a loving member of a family. He missed that. And often, I am told he would sit and look out the window as children play and started to cry. Now, I'm a teacher, and Delgado, a famous researcher, said, if you don't go through all the developmental stages, you're bound to repeat them somewhere along the way. And so many men tend to repeat a stage of life they forget. And so when you heard...
Hey, that ain't funny.
when you heard stories about Michael and Neverland and the children that would come there, he would play with the children because he had to relive the part of his life that he missed. And when he would open up his home and even his bedroom and his bed, you know, the slumber parties where you romped around on the bed, that's what he was doing, reliving that part of his life. And don't let the tabloids tell you any different, all right? You understand what I'm saying? Because the impact he had on this world was confirmed right after he passed away in June. There were celebrations all over the globe because he created a genre that will have a legacy of brilliance that will live on forever. And he created music and dance and forms that no one else has been able to duplicate. You know, everyone is now trying to do the Michael Jackson. But when he came out with the Skywalk, you remember Moonwalk in the Sky?
Moonwalk in the sky.
What do I know? I'm from a different generation.
Moonwalk in the sky.
Moonwalk in the sky.
But that moonwalk, people were amazed. And they saw it worldwide. Barbara, I hear your voice louder than anyone else's. Would you stop it? My good friend. We went to the CBC Foundation and said, you know, when we gather thousands of people from all over the country, and some have come from abroad, in September, we need to do something to recognize the life and the creativity of this young man. And at 50, that's just half your life. I still call him young man. But we need to capture his spirit. We need to capture his reach. And he reached into places that you never heard of. Somebody here is from Aceh. Aceh is in a gulf right off of India. We've been there. And they have these terrible hurricanes and typhoons that come in and they sweep life away. When he can reach into that region of the world, when he can reach into Japan, when he can reach into France and Germany, and he can reach into Australia, and he can reach into Middle America, and the southern part. I'm not talking about South America, the southern part of America, and start something new, and something you don't know because it's not always publicized, that Michael Jackson, during his life, was one of the largest philanthropists that this country has produced. And if he saw someone in need, a child or a family, he gave money We have listed, and my colleague Sheila Jackson Lee will be here any minute, but we listed on a resolution all, not all, but many of the contributions he made, not only here in this country, but worldwide. And you need to know that. And that resolution will become part of the congressional record soon. And as chair of the Congressional Entertainment Industry Caucus, we are going to see that that resolution passes through our House, the Senate, and becomes a record of this magnificent performer who lived and performed among us for not only the current generation, but those yet unborn. That is our pledge to you, and that is the reason why you sit here in a moment of history, and you will be part of it. And thank you so very, very much for attending this workshop this afternoon. And you're going to hear from experts, people who knew him personally, people who have a tremendous piece of the media, and the great and the brilliant Dr. West, whose family I've known for years up in Sacramento. Look what we spawned. And to my partners and the great Jesse Jackson and all of you, and my dear, dear colleague who is the co-chair of this year's conference and legislative conference. The foundation works with the CBC, Congressional Black Caucus, and this year, the person who has really been at the heart of it, who has done the work, who keeps a pleasant demeanor through all of this, and you don't know what it takes to put on this week and weekend. But I can't say enough about Yvette Clarke, who hails from Brooklyn, New York. Yvette Clarke, the co-chair.
To my colleague, Ambassador Congresswoman Diane E. Watson, I call her Lady Di, because she's so elegant. To our, yes, isn't she? To the very distinguished panelists here assembled, to all of you, my brothers and sisters, it's certainly my honor, my privilege, first of all, to see that so many of you are here on the same vibe. We're here to just reflect a minute and to hear some words of wisdom and to pull from the experience, the collective experience that we've shared, knowing just intrinsically about this brother we know as Michael Jackson. I first want to thank my brother, however, Mr. Londell McMillan, Esquire. His partner, Ms. Tracy Walker, and The Source magazine for coming up with this idea and hosting this wonderful event and bringing us together to honor the life and legacy and the legendary icon, Michael Joseph Jackson. The Source magazine in particular, the world's second longest running rap periodical, which has grown into one of the largest, most influential hip-hop publications in the United States of America. This magazine is known as the Bible of hip-hop, has provided American youth with a forum for self-expression, social consciousness. It has worked diligently to advocate for and empower artists across our nation. And so we need to be very cognizant of that, who is providing us with our information. Tonight, as I acknowledge the dynamic personality of my fellow Brooklynite and dear friend Londell McMillan, Londell was one of Michael Jackson's attorneys in life, and Michael Jackson's mother, Miss Catherine Jackson's attorney currently, and has represented some notable artists of our time, such as Prince, Stevie Wonder, Usher, and Kanye West. Yes, big up the brother. He walk around trying to act like he don't know, but we know. First, I am humbled and honored to pay homage to a man who was loved, adored throughout the world, and whose legacy will live forever. I grew up watching Michael Jackson. I thought he was my age at one point in time. Then I calculated, because you know how you watch a reflection on television and you young, and you're looking at someone young, and you're like, that could be my brother, that could be my cousin, that could be my friend. I could marry Michael Jackson. You know what I'm saying? Do you remember the cartoon? Oh, oh, they were bad when that came out. I would wake up early, Cheerios right in front of the TV. The Jackson 5 TV shows, the TV specials, the rivalry between the Osmonds and the Jacksons. They tried to break out with a show after the Jacksons came out with a show. But when I really reflected on it, to me, it was about black power. Unleashed in such a magnificent way. Liberation through artistry and creativity, excellence, and intellect. People don't want to give it up for the intellect. But I know Dr. Cornel West is going to talk about that. Known as the king of pop, Michael Jackson had many accomplishments. He was inducted twice into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He set multiple Guinness World Records, including the most successful entertainer of all time, winning 13 Grammy Awards and holding record 17 #1 singles, including the 4 as a member of the Jackson 5. Michael Jackson, also a notable philanthropist and humanitarian. He donated and raised millions of dollars through support of 39 charities, including his own Heal the World Foundation. The Heal the World Foundation was established in 1992 to rescue the world's most vulnerable, the children, the elderly, and animals from abuse and exploitation. The same year, during the Dangerous World Tour, Michael Jackson raised millions of dollars to provide relief and aid to developing nations. But you don't hear about that. There's a lot to be said out there, but the excellence, the precision with which this brother lived his life, and what he did with it. Michael Jackson broke racial barriers and became one of the first African American artists to amass a strong following on MTV. It should be Michael TV, you know what I'm saying? They need to just give it up like that. He opened doors for not only black musicians worldwide, but he served as an ambassador for black music, transforming popular culture. Jackson was no stranger to politics either. He received the Presidential Public Safety Communications Award from President Reagan, 25 years ago at the White House. Jackson's first hit, Beat It, Jackson's hit single, Beat It, was also used in a TV and radio campaign against drunk driving, and Reagan thanked him for that. As we discuss the life, the legacy, and the mark Michael Jackson has left on our society, we must never forget the personal impact he has left on our lives. Many of us grew up with him, watched him grow up into the icon we know and love, and he will always reside with us. Make sure the children know. Give them what you know about Michael Jackson. Because, you know, in our civil society, there's always this inclination to rewrite history. We got to tell our story of Michael Jackson, and each of us has one. I want to thank you all for, first of all, coming to this annual legislative conference, the 39th. It is our honor to host you here. And if you take anything from Michael's life, it was his boldness and his courage. People talk about Michael being timid. Nah, not that brother. That brother was breaking down barriers, blazing trails, lighting up the world so that all could see who we are truly about. Make sure that we hold that torch high and that we pass it on to our children. And thank you once again for coming to the conference. When you leave here inspired by what you hear today, go back to the community and get ready. Because Michael Jackson blazed the trail so that we could have our first African-American president, Barack Obama. Let's put it where it is. And Barack Obama needs us. This ain't no spectator sport. You got to engage to make the difference. And we're ready to do our part on the inside strategy. There's a call for you on the outside strategy. And if you don't believe that there's a call for you, look at what the opposition has done with health care and how they've depicted our president. We got to be about it. And I know that Michael Jackson would want us to be about it. He would tell those other side folks, what you say, Lady Di? He would tell them to beat it. That's right. God bless y'all. God keep y'all and enjoy the panel.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sean Robinson. I am the weekend co-anchor of Access Hollywood. A guy who I went to Spelman College in Atlanta, and he went, hi, and he went to Morehouse, Mr. Cam Moody. He works with the Obama administration. He set up a tour of the West Wing of the White House that's starting at 2:15. So I'm going to talk to you for 2 minutes because he said, Sean, you got to be here at 2:15 or you ain't getting in. So I'm just hoping to see an Obama sighting while I'm there. But I wanted to be a part of this because Londell is such a great friend of mine, and I appreciate you inviting me here today, Londell. Congresswomen Watson and Clark, thank you very much. And I've got all my other buddies on the panel, my buddy Torrey, Reverend Jesse Jackson, Deborah, Roland Martin, who needs to have his own comedy show, and the man who I think is the smartest, the most brilliant man on the planet. I mean, he can tell you that tablecloth is black, and he can lay out an argument why that tablecloth is black, and you would believe him. I'd believe him. I'd say, yes, it's black tablecloth. This part up here, not that part down there, but Dr. Cornel West, I just adore you. Amazing. So I'm just going to talk to you for just a couple of minutes, and I'm going to ask you to do something at the end of what I have to say. We have heard throughout this seminar, you will hear all about how wonderful Michael Jackson is. And I think the unfortunate thing is we are just all realizing how wonderful he is. You know, it's always like that after we lose somebody. You start to go back, and with YouTube we see, do you remember when he was on the Ed Sullivan Show and he and his brothers came out with he had that big old purple hat on and he was singing Who's Loving You, and you like, oh man, Michael, God, 10 years old and he's like singing like that. And I just remember meeting him. I'm from Detroit, Michigan, and he came to the Motown Museum once, and we got just to say hello to him, and I will always remember that. I got a chance, since I've been at Access Hollywood, to go out to Neverland. They had a 75th birthday party for Joe Jackson out at Neverland, and I remember just walking around the compound and just seeing all the candy stands and the roller coasters and the movie theaters. Michael had in Neverland, had this big, that zoo, that reptile house, and you go in and there was this 33-foot long anaconda snake inside the reptile house. But there were, just giraffes and tigers and all sorts of animals in the zoo, And I was like, gosh, this is a really, really cool place. Really cool place. And you could see the love that he had for many of the children that came there to Neverland, and just how they had such a great time. Just it was like a world that many of these kids had never, ever seen before. I was in the makeup room the other day, and LaToya Jackson walks in, because Access Hollywood just hired LaToya for our correspondent for Dancing with the Stars. So watch every week as she's on Dancing with the Stars, and she was just talking. She doesn't talk about, doesn't talk about Michael, and you don't ask her anything unless, she wants to bring it up. But I had I've interviewed Janet Jackson many times, and I remember her saying, this was a couple of years ago, I was saying, tell me about your brother, the relationship that you have with Michael. And she says, when they were little, Michael used to call her names, just kind of tease her and mess with her. And I was like, what did he call you? She said, I can't tell you, because, I can't tell you, because you're so, I said, no, tell me, what did he tell me? What did he call you? And she whispers in my ear, she says, Slaughter Hog. And I go, whoa, that's kind of tough to hear when you're a little gal there. I remember when I was sitting in, it's been like two and a half months now. I was sitting in the hair salon, and I was just kind of on my BlackBerry, and I started getting all these messages from work on my BlackBerry, and I was like, I don't feel like answering any of these, and this woman comes up to the hairstylist, and she said, did you hear Michael Jackson was taken to the hospital? And they said he died. And I kind of looked, and I was like, God, would she get out of here, please, with that crap? Because, you hear stories like this all the time. Somebody supposedly happened, and then it didn't. And then I looked down, and from work, I had about 70 messages on my BlackBerry, and I started reading them, and I remember feeling just this tingling feeling just all throughout my body, and just numb. And I said, no, that can't be true. And the hairstylist, he finished my hair, and I went out to the car, and I just sat there for a minute. And I looked at my BlackBerry again, and more like maybe 150 messages came through. And I go, that can't be true. And then the other days were just like a blur. And I don't think it really sunk in for me until we were watching the memorial service. And Michael's daughter came up to the podium. She started talking about her father. And what I was going to ask you to do is, so often, especially in the entertainment business, now we're talking about his philanthropy. Now we're talking about how much he meant to us. Now we're saying he wrote the soundtrack to our life. Now we're talking about it. This is something we needed to be talking about before. And the reason that we don't talk about it, the reason that you have, and I have these debates with management all the time. Let's not focus on that. Let's focus on this. Let's focus. And they say, that's what the public wants. That's what's going to buy magazines. If we have a cover about all the horrible things that this person is going through, and we have a cover about how great they are, you're going to buy the one that has the horrible cover. So the media feeds off what they think you want to hear. And the more you voice how you don't want to hear that stuff. You want to hear more positive stories. You want to hear what makes a person great. The more you start saying that, the more you will see a reflection of that when you turn on the television. They think that all you want to hear is the bad stuff. That's what they think. They think you are interested in nothing else. So, gosh, I wish Michael had heard about all these wonderful things when he was still here. I wish that we were talking about his philanthropy when he was still here. I wish he knew how much we miss him. So start letting your voices be heard. Start calling CNN, start calling Access Hollywood, start calling NBC, start calling MSNBC, start calling all of your shows and say, I don't want to hear that. I'm going to turn you off if you're reporting this. Or I'm not going to buy that magazine cover if you're reporting that. Start letting your voices be heard so the next time the people will know how much we care about them and how much we love them before they are gone. Thank you. I got to get to the White House right now. Thanks.
Okay, we're going to get right into the panel, but I believe Congresswoman Watson, you wanted to make one final announcement.
I want you to know that the Los Angeles community, the state of California, and the nation were all concerned about Michael Jackson's death. And in contact with the family and the people who handle his career, we've all met, and I assured them that anything untoward about Michael will come out into the open because the Federal Bureau of Investigation is involved in this lengthy investigation. So just know that you might be sitting there and saying, what is taking so long? They are studying every intricate detail about his life and his death and what happened afterwards. So just know that in a short while, justice will out and justice will be done. Have faith.
Okay. Again, thank you all for your patience. We're going to talk about the joy. We're also going to talk about some of the pain, the lessons learned, the life, the legacy of Michael Jackson. For in so many ways, the joy that he brought to so many of us, there were lessons that we should learn about life and dealing with pain, and how many of us deal with issues ranging from depression and sickness. And in spite of what you may see or what you may think, for celebrities and others who are icons and idols, they're human, and we all have pain. And my sister Terry Williams here, who's a pain activist, who's been very much around getting us as a community to deal with our pain, was kind enough to put that on the top of my mind. Before I introduce Teray, who will be our panelist to discuss these issues with this distinguished group, I just also want to recognize a woman here who's very, very near and dear to many of us here. She comes from New York, but she's a woman of our world. She's Queen Mother Adelaide Sanford, and I'd just like her to say hello, and us to stand up and give a hand to Queen Mother Adelaide Sanford and have her come and greet you. And once she greets you, we will get into our panel, and you will know right away why I have asked her to greet you in the love and spirit of peace. Queen Mother Adelaide Sanford, thank you so much.
My beloved ones, my extraordinarily gifted, talented, resilient ones. We're here today because we want to talk about our son, our brother, our grandson. We're here today using the hackneyed, worn-out language of the oppressor. Would that we had our own language that would not be tarnished and disfigured. But Michael Jackson is the epitome of taking that which is foreign to you and giving it such pizzazz, such polish, until the words were as though they had never been spoken before. And his dance was as though there had never been a dancer born, and his creativity, his effulgence, his magnificence transcended anything that had ever been seen or heard. Why is it that we didn't know about his tenderness, about his bliss, about his pain, about his agony? because he wore the mask. And we are so proficient in wearing the mask. But beneath that mask, there was pain and passion and genius. And I commend all of you to remember that they didn't change the rules of the game in sports. They didn't change the notes in music. But you, Michael gave it a pizzazz, gave it an infinite resonance that had never been heard before. And my beloved brother, son, here, El Londell, look what he's doing for that family. Look how he is changing the rules of the law for them. And he was my student in elementary school, and I've never let him go. As an elder in the African community, I give you the power and the capacity to know that you are beloved, special, extraordinary, gifted, talented. And when the time comes, don't sit it out. Dance.
Let's give her a hand. Let's give our elder Queen Mother. Okay, Brother Touré. Touré is an American novelist, music journalist, cultural critic, writer, extraordinary brother who's been a contributor in so many different forms of media, from MSNBC to Rolling Stones to BET to many others. Many of these people we're going to save the long-winded introductions because many of them you know. So without further ado, and to speed things up and to get us through, put your hands together for Touré, who will moderate this panel.
Michael Jackson will never be duplicated, will never be eclipsed, will never be equaled. He started life with a handful of aces, right? Singer, dancer, producer, songwriter. He could do everything. But I think he perhaps started at a bad table, right? Gary, Indiana, Nowhereville. But he had his father who pressed him forward into the limelight. And he also had at least two incredible breaks of luck. Malcolm Gladwell in Outliers talks about you have to have the historical moment with you as sort of the wind beneath your wings to be able to get somewhere. Michael Jackson does this twice. In Outliers, Malcolm points out people doing it once. He comes along in the 60s when there's this integrationist push in America, right? So he gets behind the power of Motown, and a white America says, hey, we really should pay attention to this guy. And then again in the 80s, when we start to have a really ascensionist push, people like Reverend Jackson running for president, Bill Cosby, #1 television show in America, and here comes Michael Jackson saying, I want to be the #1 artist in the world. And it didn't happen by accident. In the program at the People's Funeral at the Staples Center, LaToya tells the story of how he went to the Grammys behind Off the Wall in '79. I think they gave him 1 Grammy, was it? Something like some paltry number, and he was like, oh, no. The next time, my room will be filled with Grammys, and they will know my greatness. You know, but there was so much. I mean, he comes from amazing schools. We talk about education. He comes from 2 amazing schools. Being able to sit in the wings and watch Jackie Wilson and James Brown and Diana Ross. So to be able to take his talent and to see them, what they're doing. And then with Berry Gordy and being around Berry and Suzanne DePass and Marvin Gaye, Stevie Wonder, Diana Ross, all of them teaching him even more. So by the time he gets to be a solo artist in '79, as still a very young man, he has the power to be able to have control over his career. He says, I want Quincy Jones to produce Off the Wall, and then subsequently Thriller. The label said no. Quincy's too jazzy. He won't know how to make hits. Michael, very rare among solo artists, new solo artists, was able to say, no, this is the guy, and we're going with him. Later for you. He's able to get that power. Off the Wall and Thriller would not have happened in their way without Quincy Jones. More than that, by 82, when Thriller comes along, he'd been a star for well over a decade. Household name. How many people on their second album are already household names? It's very rare. So he's able to flip it and to put MTV, which had not been playing black artists at all, because they'd been following the white radio paradigm of just playing rock artists, he was able to use the power of his music, his force in America, Walter Yetnikoff from CBS, Sony, to say, we're going to withhold all our artists unless you play this guy. And they said, well, you know, he's pretty good, so we'll take him. And he's making movies, not videos, but movies. So he transforms MTV not on just a racial level, but on an aesthetic level. And I would say that nobody has come close to the video oeuvre that Michael Jackson created. And they had a lot of time to catch up. But not just that, the perfect storm really takes force in the early 80s when the yuppie era is coming in. The CD, the compact disc is new. For the younger people, that's what we did before MP3s. He's looking at me like, what are you talking about with these CDs? So America had all this new disposable income. Yuppies and buppies are going around. They want music to play in their cars with their new CDs. And here comes Thriller. This perfect pop thing, which is rock, which is soul, which is make you want to dance, make you want to cry. It was something for every part of your soul. Michael Jackson was not just, the son of James Brown. He was also the son of Audrey Hepburn, right? He's not just this black figure. He also had enough in him that white people felt comfortable and palatable and able to love him. And I still personally haven't fully processed that he's gone. At the end of Entourage last week, they played I Want to Be Where You Are. And I listen to Michael Jackson music all the time now, but, that's when I put the iPod on and I say, okay, I'm ready for Michael. I'm going to play. This was hit Michael coming into my life at a moment when I wasn't expecting it. I'm in Entourage zone, right, with Turtle and Jamie Lynn Sigler. And suddenly here comes young Michael, that perfect voice. And I got chills, and it was like, whoa. It was like, when you run into a photograph of your dead friend when you're not ready. It threw me off. I was like, totally messed me up. I think a lot of us are still messed up behind Michael's death, sudden as it was, untimely as it was. Perhaps he was cresting again, our brother snatched from us. So this august panel is going to dig into who he was for us. I think you know most of these people by now, but I'm just going to call out some names just so we're clear. Congresswoman Diane Watson, representing Hollywood. L. Londell McMillan was Michael Jackson's attorney, is Katherine Jackson's attorney. Of course, you know Reverend Jackson. You know Deborah Lee, the chairman, or we should say chairperson, and CEO of BET. I'm going to skip you 1 second, sir. Roland Martin from CNN and TV One, and the intellectual Michael Jordan. Cornel West.
I don't think Mike was that good.
Maybe we should say the Michael Jackson of intellects.
Yeah, that's better.
But let's just dive right into it. Let's go down the line this way. Congresswoman first. She's going to leave. So, Londell, what did Michael mean to you? And take it personally, aesthetically, musically, whatever way you want to go.
Well, as a host, I'll take host privileges and say, since I've been speaking already, I'm going to pass it on, and quickly just pass it on to my panel to speak on it. But what he was to me was a client, and then a friend, and then the son of a mother, who I feel very strongly that we can never support anyone that would not support the mother of any child to have a seat at any table of that family at any time.
Right.
And so that's what Michael is, about a legacy. So I'll pass it on so that others can speak. Thank you.
The fact that Londell McMillan, an African-American lawyer, was his lawyer, and his parents' lawyer, says depths about those who have all the right imagery but somehow African American lawyers and accountants and professional services don't qualify. It's as much about Michael's sense of what was important to him. He made the judgment in Londell. I really think we ought to give Londell McMillan a big hand, really. Several lessons learned. We say we did not pay much attention to Michael's philanthropy and the like, is that something within us, I'll take somebody like Dr. West to work with us on it, is that what is it about us that makes us want to bury the living and resurrect the dead? Ask us to name 10 black heroes, we'll name 10 great dead people. Seems that nobody who's alive is worthy of adoration and respect. That says a lot about our psyche that needs healing. Another point is, what is the us in Michael? And what is the Michael in us? Michael didn't just happen unilaterally, vertically. He was caused horizontally over a process of time and years. I can't get much further from the #1 global musical family in the history of the world. I remember going to Mayor Dick Hatcher's inauguration back in '68, and that was just not so well-known family performing at Dick Hatcher's inauguration. The first African-American mayor, along with Carl Stokes, right after the Voting Rights Act. On one day, the mistake of my life was around 1970, preparing Expo, and Junius Griffin came upstairs and said, "Reverend, there's this group downstairs that want to perform. They're over at the Regal Theater." And I said, "But before you go any further, we can. We have Nance Wilson, we have Quincy Jones, we have Cannonball Adderley, we have Sammy Davis. We just don't have room for them." And so he said, "Well, at least come down," and says that they want to see your afro and take a picture. I came downstairs, and there they were in the station wagon with the U-Haul attached to it, and their dad was the driver. You couldn't really say no to them then. That was a setup. And they performed, and of course, it was never quite the same again. So we worked with them at that stage. At the Victory Tour, we met with the family and had prayer with them because there was pressures on them to come apart at that time. We worked with Londell in Michael's financial struggles. No artist ever in the history of music amassed the catalog of Michael Jackson. And Michael ran his catalog. The pressure to take his catalog was immense. We worked through that process with Sony and the Japanese. We worked with him through the trial in Neverland, where they had put his name above a jail cell he was to stay in that night. He was in knots because they had planned to humiliate him to death in jail. So there's that side of it. But I want to say this. When I said, what is the us in Michael? Before we get to Hollywood, here are 9 children and 2 parents in a 4-room house on Jackson Street. 6 boys on double bunk beds with their mom and dad in the big bed in the bedroom, and the 3 girls on the couch in the living room. 11 people in one house. And that house had to be disciplined and structure and order. Devout Jehovah's Witnesses, a religion that has a lot of focus in it. Joe Jackson, by day, was a crane operator. Went back and learned to be a welder. Then by night, when other boys are playing in unstructured ways, so-called childhood development, they were in the house, in the living room doing choreography and learning chords and to play guitars and drums in the house. That was their stage. There was no downtown stage development in Gary, Indiana. And so Michael did have a childhood that was organized and disciplined, much the way many of our great athletes are, from first grade to middle school to high school. No one is great because they're lucky. Michael's the result of a plan. And so the fact that he was indoors singing while others were outdoors playing basketball, they got what they wanted. If you call that development, basketball, got what he wanted, records and music. It was a home of discipline and planning. And that family left Gary intact. They left in a station wagon. None of them had ever been to jail, shot or got shot, or drugged. This was a family.
Frank Sinatra is considered one of the greatest entertainers. But the real deal, nobody talks about Frank Sinatra these days. One of the reasons they talk about Elvis, because there's a place people can go to, they can relive, they can visit, experience all of that. And so that is just, it is a central gathering place for every anniversary. Every major anniversary, Larry King goes down there, sits in a mansion, does an interview. So again, it's just one of those things. And so, I would say, traveling stuff, absolutely. But I do believe to establish someone's legacy, you use the model of presidential libraries. That's one of the reasons why they do that, because people will always be able to go to that and visit that kind of stuff like that.
Yeah,
so.
and to that point, just, as a lawyer, that the notion of property and assets are valuable, and it's what institutions are about. When we talk about institution building, we have to understand the importance of our property, our land, the physical buildings we put on things, our organizations, our foundation. We as a community are getting better, but we have to laser focus on our institutions, our organizations, our landmass, our resources, our buildings, our foundations, and that will create the legacy that lives beyond our lifetime and our children's lifetime, and it will then give us, I think, the kind of groundwork and the foundation for what we do to live on what we call in perpetuity. Mm-hmm. So that's forever. And particularly, I like to say this too from a cultural imperative, what I like to share with young people when I talk to them, if there's any group of people that should not run away from the notion of asset building and property development and wealth and resources, should be people of the African diaspora. Mm-hmm. Because we were treated as property all over the world. Mm-hmm. And we've been colonized in part because of the property that's in the soil that God gave to us. Mm-hmm. So if there's any group of people that should be the masters of property and asset development, I would argue that it should be us. Mm-hmm. So please tell young people, don't run away. This is one of the things I actually do appreciate with Jewish culture. They use their history as an asset for their future. Mm-hmm. They take the pain and turn it into power. So our history tells us that we as property, we were treated as property. We should be the masters of property expertise and development.
Downtown. We qualified to vote before 65, Toure. But when the walls came down, that which was obvious became apparent. And so Michael sees that moment, and the man and the time converged. And so these global audiences where whites by the tens of thousands in Europe and Asia found a comfort zone. We saw it in Michael before we saw it in Barack, in the sense that he laid the groundwork for global integration of culture that transcended. And so I want to thank you for allowing me to be a part of this session. I close on this. I think about Berry Gordy, because that family left there with the help of Gladys Knight, went to Berry Gordy. So what it is, he was at Sammy Davis's last event before he died. So from Berry Gordy to Sammy Davis to Jane Brown's funeral, Michael was always being questioned, are you black enough? All such foolishness as that. But here's the genius of turning nothing into something of Berry Gordy that finds its way into Michael's mind. Barry said he tried 29 businesses and failed. And he tried the box, he failed. Somebody failed him. He worked on the assembly line, he couldn't take it. He tried to be a jazz record entrepreneur, and no one was interested in Coltrane with him, so that didn't work. And everything would come on, borrow another 1,000 from his parents, who had a little store on the corner in Detroit. His family would say, "Here come Barry again. He gonna trick you, mama." He come again. Since the last time he came home and got $500, he lost that too. And then went to his sister Esther's house and knocked on the door early in the morning, maybe 5 o'clock. She came downstairs. She saw him. She knew it was Barry. Had on clothes, night clothes. And she simply opened the door and went back upstairs. And he sat down and began to write. He said, "Home for me is where when you go there, no matter where you came from, they can't say no." And he sat down and began to write on a piece of tissue paper, to be loved, oh, what a feeling to be loved." And that became Jackie Wilson's big hit. So Michael comes out of that kind of creative cultural syndrome. So it's not just what is the us in Michael is as important as what is the Michael in us. Thank you very much.
Okay. First of all, I want to thank Londell for the invitation to be here today, and it's really very special to me personally and professionally, and I'm going to talk about Michael and my relationship with him in both of those ways. As Reverend Jackson knows well, I grew up in Greensboro, North Carolina, a place where he spent a lot of time protesting and boycotting. And I moved to North Carolina. I grew up in a military family, so we lived in Germany and LA and places that weren't anything like Greensboro. Greensboro was very segregated when I moved there in the 60s. And so it was the first time I had been in a very segregated environment. Went to all-black schools, lived in an all-black neighborhood, had all-black bank, and so it was very segregated, but we had everything we needed, and we had great role models like Mrs. Sanford, who was just here, who told us we could do anything we wanted to do and that we were brilliant, and that our black school was better than the white school across town because we had better teachers who really cared about us. I say all that to say it was a very special environment and a great place to grow up. But one thing that was going on during that time in the 60s and 70s was the growth of black music. And that was so important to us and our identity. And I'm going to go further than Torre did and go back to the little 45s that we had. I had a little turntable in my bedroom that played 45s. And you know, the first people that really came along during the Motown era were the Temptations and the Supremes. And so the Temptations and Supremes were really my idols, first of all, and I had every little 45 that they had made. But what they represented was really unattainable because, you know, they wore gowns and they went to Europe and they had big wigs, and they were wonderful, but they were older, and so they were sort of idols and unattainable. But we loved their music, and it was very important to us. But then along came the Jackson 5, and they were kids just like we were kids. And they didn't have wigs and long gowns and tuxedos. They had fringe vests and jeans and, you know, beautiful colors, and they were just kids, and we could relate to them. And they were attainable. They were just like us. And as talented as they were, you know, you felt like you were a part of it. And I remember when they were on Ed Sullivan. I remember when they were on Soul Train. I remember when, you know, they started touring, and everyone wanted to be Michael Jackson. Everyone my age was in love with Jermaine Jackson, but they wanted to be Michael Jackson because he was the most talented. And, you know, he was just this cute little boy who would come out and sing and make everything look so effortlessly. I mean, he just did it. And, you know, Torre mentioned The Outliers before. In that book, they say if you put 10,000 hours of anything, you can be a perfectionist. And especially if you add it on to talent, you can be a phenomenon. And that's what Michael Jackson was. He never had a childhood, as someone said, but he put in hours and hours of practice. And he was already talented, so he just became the best entertainer ever. Well, I remember when their first album came out, I was working downtown at Belk Department Store. You remember Belk Department Store? And it's right across from that Woolworths where you set in. And because that's where I ate lunch when I was working at Belk Department Store. But I remember making my little Christmas bonus, and what I did was I went and bought the first Jackson 5 album. You know, I don't remember how much it cost, but that was such a big thing that they had this album out, that they were kids, and I think I bought my brother one. My brother I didn't like that much, but I brought him one for Christmas. But anyway, my next recollection is when the Jackson 5 came to the Greensboro Coliseum and to perform. And, you know, I wanted to look just like them. So my mother, who was a seamstress, we went out and bought purple suede material, and we were down on our living room floor making a purple suede fringe vest. And my mother, who's now 86, told me the other day that she remembers how the razor blades cut her hands, because she was sitting there making the fringe with the razor blade so I could look like Michael Jackson. And I had the beads, and I put the beads on the fringe one by one. And I wanted to look like Michael just in case I happened to run into him in the corridor of the Greensboro Coliseum. You never know when you're at a concert. So it was very important to look just like him. But that was a great concert. And then I remember going from that to having the good fortune to be at the Victory concert when it came into D.C. You know, I remember watching and taping Motown 25 and his moonwalk performance and playing it back to death. I mean, it was the first time, you know, having a tape recorder really made a difference, because we could play it over and over. It was such a magical moment when he came out with his brothers, and then he just went into this individual performance and showed us what, you know, hard work would do and what perfection would do, and how if you really worked hard and you were talented, you could be anything you wanted to do. So he inspired me as a young person, and he did create the soundtrack to my life. And you know, at first as the Jackson 5, and then secondly as Michael Jackson, the individual performer. But I had the good fortune to grow up and be affiliated with a company called BET, and I've been at BET about 24 years, and Michael had such a great impact on BET, and you could argue that without Michael, BET would never have become a successful business. Someone mentioned earlier the videos that he created, and when BET was first created, we didn't have very much money, and music videos were cheap, free programming, and that's why we had so many music video shows in addition to the talk shows that we had. But when Michael came along and he made videos into films, and his record company spent, you know, $800,000, $1 million on creating a Thriller video or a Bad video. We were able to take those little pieces of film, put them together, and make, you know, highly professional, created shows. I mean, we didn't make the videos, the labels did, but they gave them to us for free, and it really turned this network into a business model that worked. And Michael led that charge. He was the one who really turned videos into full-fledged entertainment. And he did it better than anyone else. And you waited with bated breath for a new Michael Jackson video to come out. And the thing that he did, several people have mentioned MTV, and he really was important to MTV, but he was so important to BET also because he would never, ever give a video to MTV without giving it to BET at the same time. And when MTV wasn't playing black videos, BET was. And so for Michael to come along and to be as talented and accomplished as he was, he could have easily gone to MTV and forgot about BET, you know, and that would have been the death knell for us. But if he came out with a new video, he said, I'm going to premiere it at noon, or I'm going to premiere it at midnight, and MTV and BET gets the video at the same time. You know, I'm not going to give preference to either one of them. They're both going to get it. So he allowed us to stay in the game even when MTV opened its doors and started playing black videos. I mean, so it's sort of like, you know, white universities when they started allowing black folks to play ball, then all of a sudden the black colleges couldn't keep the players anymore. Well, that would have happened to us if Michael had let it happen, and he didn't.
Wow.
So, you know, whenever we called him and asked him to do anything, he would try his best to do it. He was our first Walk of Fame award recipient. It wasn't televised, so you don't remember it, but it did happen. I was there. And he got our first Walk of Fame, and he came, and he would only perform one song. He said, I don't want to do a whole concert, but I'll perform one song. And he brought in kids, and he did a terrific song, and it really created that franchise for us. I remember when he came to the BET Awards and paid tribute to James Brown, and what a magical moment that was. And I remember once he came on stage, and it was a surprise to everyone. I remember Puffy ran over to me and he said, you guys are kicking MTV's butt right now. Because everyone was so surprised that he was there, and it was he was such a James Brown fan, and it was so important for him to be there, and James Brown was so touched by it. And, you know, they danced and had fun, and it was a great moment. And then I remember another occasion when, right before his trial, and his PR person called me and asked me to host a reception at my house in Washington because Michael Jackson was coming to town, and he wanted to meet the power brokers in Washington. And he was going to go up to the Hill, and he was going to meet with CBC, and it was sort of a PR campaign for him before his trial started. So I agreed to host a reception, and I had about 250 professionals, black professionals, mostly doctors and lawyers and politicians at my house. This was on the eve of his trial starting, so all the bad rumors and gossip had already started about him, but I remember folks came to my house that night, and I've never seen so many black professionals push each other out of the way to try to get to meet an artist. And they had all grown up on Michael Jackson, and they were so excited to be there and so excited to be in his presence. And he was good enough. He stood in a receiving line that night, and he shook everyone's hand. He got photos taken with everyone. He made comments about what people were wearing, what they looked like, you know, if he knew them, how their mother was. And he was just the most amazing guy. And that was the most time I got to spend with Michael, and we talked about business, and we talked about his family, and I was just so impressed about how different he was than what you heard about him, and what a sincere person he was, and how personable he was, and just how he loved people. He loved adults, he loved children, and he was delighted to be there. And then the final thing I want to talk about is his death. Because as Sean said, it's one of those times in life where you always remember where you were when you heard about it, when you heard that he had been taken to the hospital, when you heard that he may have been on his deathbed. And that was a Thursday afternoon. I happened to be out in LA because it was a Thursday before our BET award show. And so we were getting ready for our award show, and I was on my way to give a speech. And just before I walked in, I heard the news, and I had to go give this speech. and it wasn't clear whether he had died or not. And then I got word while I was giving the speech that he had actually died. And, you know, it's still unbelievable. But the first thing I thought about was, you know, we have this award show coming up, and what are we going to do? And how are we going to turn it into a tribute for Michael? So as soon as I finished the speech, I had a phone call, conference call with my senior staff, and all of a sudden we just shifted into totally different gears. And it was Thursday, the show was Sunday, and we had to remake the whole show in a matter of 2.5 days. And it was really a labor of love for everyone at BET, and some of the staff didn't go home that night. They stayed at the office all day, all night, pulling tapes, pulling footage. You know, people say we had 3 days to remake the show. We really only had 1.5 days, because the next day was Friday, and then after that you couldn't pull footage. You couldn't ask for rights. Everything was gone. So even though we had Saturday and Sunday, we really had to get it together within a day and a half. But when I saw the people at BET pull together and really make this happen and reach out to artists, and artists were willing to rehearse all day and all night because they were coming to perform one song, and because we turned it into a tribute, now they had to do another song, and everything was moving up until really the day of the show. But everyone, because it was a live show, and because it was a tribute to Michael, and because he was so important to BET, to the folks that worked there, to the artists who came and paid tribute to him, everyone put in the time necessary to make this show a real tribute to him. And not just a 5-minute tribute, not just the opening number, but a tribute that went throughout the show. And we had 10.7 million viewers that night, which was also a testament to how much he affected our world and our community. And it's still the largest show in cable this year. And, you know, we say, it was almost like he gave BET one last gift. He didn't die 3 days before the MTV Awards. And, you know, we tried to really pay tribute in a way that would make him proud. And I think one of my proudest moments, not only because of the way people pulled together and made this show as great as it was, but I had word through Reverend Sharpton 2 days later that the family was really happy with the show and that they appreciated what we had done, and they thought it was a fitting tribute to Michael. As I said, I'm honored to be here and to be able to talk about Michael and what he meant to all of us, but especially what he meant to BET and how we were able to grow and live through his music and finally to pay tribute to him, I think, when it meant the most. So thank you.
To the man with the African cufflinks.
Yes, no, I know we ran out of time, but I want to thank my dear brother Londale Macmillan for his vision, not just in terms of his legal brilliance, but also his cultural leadership.
I'm sorry, I'm going to let you finish, but I just want to
acknowledge
that Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee has joined the panel.
Let's acknowledge, absolutely. Sheila Jackson, one and only. But no, I'm going to be very brief, and I'm going to try to get right to the point in terms of trying to wrestle with Michael Joseph Jackson. He was first and foremost his mother's child and his daddy's kid. Catherine Esther on the one hand and Joseph Walter on the other. Why is that important? Because we can't talk about this genius unless we relate it to our own lives. And like Michael Jackson, you came out of your mama's womb, and like Michael Jackson, you're going to end up in a tomb. So the question is, what kind of life you're going to live in light of the life that he lived? This is difficult to talk about because white mainstream media understands him as an isolated icon on a stage and screen. We have to begin with him as an embedded human being in family and tradition. That's why the first time I heard about the death of Michael, I was just getting off a plane from Turkey. Yeah. The first thing that came to mind, of course, was Catherine, Joe, 3 precious sisters, 5 precious brothers. Yes. The funeral is always for the living, not the dead.
Yes.
How you going to keep a tradition alive? when it comes to the music. We've talked about Jackie Wilson. We've talked about James Brown. We could talk about a whole host of others. He was the crystallization of the greatest tradition in the modern world, which is that of black music. It's that of a peoples who had control solely over their voices and their stylizations of space and time with their bodies for over 244 years. That's why the anthem of the peoples that produced Michael Jackson is "Lift Every Voice," because voice became the major means by which critical intelligence and combative imagination and moral courage was manifest in a white supremacist civilization. So black music ain't no plaything.
That's right.
It's a question of life and death and joy and sorrow. And in that Jackson family, you got wounds, you got scars, you got bruises. And the fundamental question for you and I is, how do we transfigure our wounds into wind behind each other's back? Or how do we transfigure our scars into what soul music is, which is the sharing of soothing sweetness against the backdrop of catastrophic circumstances, be it slavery, Jim Crow, or the hood today? That's why Luther Vandross means so much to me. That's why Marley. That's why I can't live without Gladys Knight. That's why Sarah Vaughan is divine for me. I'm speaking for myself right now. It ain't no plaything. But Michael Jackson is my true soul brother, because like him and like all of us, he's wrestling with wounds and scars, and how's he going to negotiate and navigate that? And then in the age of Obama, where so many of our young people are so addicted to success, here you get the most successful black genius in popular culture, Michael Jackson, wrestling with spiritual malnutrition, emptiness of the soul. How do you deal with your soul in the face of all the commodities that you have, all your mansions, all your fans? Do they really love you when you're in trouble? Who was with him? It was just his mama with him every day when he went to that court. All the folk claiming they loved him so much, putting him down like he was a cockroach. He's a human being, but who's going to love us? That's the question. He's loving us through his music. It's like R. Kelly, it's like Marvin Gaye, it's like Billie Holiday. Genius and problematic life. I'm trying to be truthful today. Got too much time.
Church.
But how do you deal with spiritual malnutrition? That's the question. That's what I love about my sister Terry Williams, talking about black pain. You see, Michael was up and Michael was down. You up and you down. Just that his music can help you stay up. Whereas I don't want to downplay your musical talents, but I suspect most of your music couldn't keep him up. The music of these young brothers could. Oh, yes. But something else, we all have gifts. He had a gift. He remained true to his calling despite his wounds, so that his genius could become wind at our back and soothing to us, even given his wrestling with that emptiness of the soul that goes with the American dream, in which you find some huge mansion in some vanilla suburbs and have people crazy about you. It's the shallowness of what fame can be. It's the hollowness of what celebrity status can be if you're not working it in a way. They're just using it as a service to others. And as a Christian, I say the least of these. Ooh.
Hold on. She got to go too. That's right. I believe the Reverend, after he set the room on fire, has got to go. You gonna hold on? Hold on. I know you got your own security guard. But the Congresswoman wants to have something. Just 1 minute, please.
Well, first of all, let me thank Deborah Lee for putting her media resources to tell the story of the American iconic family, the Jackson family. Let me thank Londell Macmillan for being here and being a comfort to that family. There's nothing more to be said about Dr. Cornel West, and certainly nothing to be said more about the genius on CNN that always puts substance to truth to power, and Roland Martin. He is from Houston, Texas, and I have to claim him, and for that reason, I know his family wants him to maybe even travel to Houston, so I'm going to just say to you, my name is Sheila Jackson Lee. I represent the 18th Congressional District, and I want you to know that what I sensed on that day in the Staples Center was a homegoing service. And the family appreciated the love and affection that the broader community, the world, showed to their son. They want you to continue it. I cannot speak for them, but I know that they want this sense of who he was and is to be invested. Thank you for your critiquing and analyzing and spirit. So here are my simple words on the story of Michael Jackson and why I saw him in a different light. He came to my office in about 2004 or so in Washington. Didn't have to come. There was a whole series of issues going on, but he came giving. He came as a caretaker. He came as a humanitarian. Really came with no trappings, I will tell you that, but we poured out the House office building. People were running down hallways trying to shout and touch. Offices were unmanned and unwomaned because they had already left their seat. No, they weren't paying attention to whatever news was in the news, Dr. West. They left the halls of government to be able to find Michael Jackson. I had members who were saying, what's going on? But he came to talk about, at that time, as it still is, the piercing devastation of HIV/AIDS. He came to speak seriously. He came to speak out of his heart. And he was not talking to an empty room. 15 ambassadors from Africa sat and listened to Michael Jackson. And we were planning and preparing an effort to strike down the devastation of HIV/AIDS, which goes on. And why did they come? Because of the trust and confidence of the man who led We Are the World. His pedigree had already been spread. And so when we wrote the tribute to him that is filed, it was all about the truth, the humanitarian catalog of what he has done and what he did. And so as this effort, this dialogue continues, I mean, we were just amazed. We did it in 24 hours within his death to chronicle everywhere he'd gone, building burn units, which he did not have to do, rebuilding wings of hospitals, giving to the United Negro College Fund. Many of you wouldn't even note that he had been a big giver to that. The We Are the World, where he and Smokey and Quincy got together. He used his musical genius to be able to be We Are the World. And I finish on this. We must carry the legacy. I legislate, agitate, and advocate. You are my boss. Those in Texas more so than you. And as the idea of honor comes, as we work through getting a robust health care bill out, and you will be the underpinnings of that, telling the truth about the 18,000 that die every year because they're having no insurance. Remember his songs. Beat It, but remember Man in the Mirror. And I always used to paraphrase it, woman or man in the mirror. That's what Michael was about. He yearned to be a change maker and to care about people. He yearned to see the joy in the eyes of children who would come to Neverland. He enjoyed it. And so when I went to the Staples Center and we were dismissed, as we say in the church, there were people from around the world that were sort of gathering outside. They were either inside or they'd flown, but you know how you come out of a church and you're lingering. That's right. And folk came up and said, he changed my life. When I heard Man, I said, where are you from? I'm from London, England. I just flew in. He changed my life. I took that song. So what we take lightly, what we just take for granted, oh, the Jackson 5 out of Gary, Indiana, or the Jackson family. other folk are just pouring their heart out. One brother told me, and I call everybody a brother, he was in Ireland. He said for 2 weeks he traveled, and for 2 weeks he heard nothing more but Michael Jackson's music, this is around the time of his death, on the radio. Iconic. Storytelling. And there is tragedy in everyone's life. And I close on a note, but for the grace of God, there go I. My willingness to come because of the family was because but for the grace of God, and every human being warrants the dignity, the reward, the champion, the cause, the respect of this gentleman. The man or woman in the mirror, his story. I hope it will be your story, that we work together in this broad, wonderful coalition of thinkers and lovers of his music, this wonderful media giant, this beautiful woman, Deborah Lee, who has offered her media to tell our story, all of our stories, that we will define ourselves and our icons, and we'll teach our children respect so that they can too make a difference. The man or woman in the mirror. God bless all of you all. God bless America. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Roland.
Thank you. Thank you. Roland Martin.
As I was sitting here deciding what to say, I was listening to Reverend Jackson, then listening to Dr. West. And let me say in advance, if I step on somebody's toes, deal with it yourself. I'm used to it on TV, and some might do it now. There's a chapter in my book, Listen to the Spirit Within, called Thank God for Daddy. And as I've watched the coverage, as I've listened to the conversations of a lot of different people, but especially black people, I have been incredibly offended and angry with the dismissive nature of Joe Jackson. And I say that because as Reverend Jackson mentioned, when they drove up, Daddy was driving the U-Haul. When Reverend Al Sharpton talked about them traveling overnight from Gary, Indiana to the Apollo, driving that U-Haul with the family in tow, Daddy was at the wheel. And it amazes me when I listen to black folk denigrate Michael's daddy as if his daddy was not in his life. We cannot talk about giving millions to the UNCF unless you were in a position to make the millions. You cannot talk about what it meant to be the incredible talent if you do not even recognize the person who was there to ensure the talent was brought out. In the same book, they quoted on television of Michael talking about the relationship with his daddy. In the very same book, Michael also wrote, if it was not for my daddy's insistence, I would not be here. And so we cannot sit here and tell half of a story, tell a quarter of a story. You must tell the full story. There are people sitting in this room right now who had issues with their mama and their daddy, but they are still here. There are people who have gone through all kinds of stuff, but when you talk about the pain in your family, you also talk about the joy. You cannot think about Frankie Beverly Mays with joy and pain. Right. And so at some point, we have to recognize that when you're watching the coverage, how many folks in this room have been adopted? Anybody adopted? Adopted folks should be angry when you see the coverage asking, well, who are the kids' real daddy?
Right.
If Lyndon Johnson Rice walked in this room right now and talked about her daddy, John H. Johnson, folks would say, man, we loved her daddy, but she was adopted by John H. Johnson and Eunice. And so we see her as his real child. And so when we think about Michael Jackson and coverage, black folks should be up in arms with how they denigrate somebody and say, well who's the real daddy? That's his children.
That's right.
He's their father.
That's right.
So whether or not you like it or not, I just don't recall anchors asking who is the real mama and father of any child Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt carrying around the country. There were people on television who were saying, well, let's talk about the trial, let's talk about molestation. And I said, well, first of all, last I checked, there was a trial. Last I checked, he was acquitted. You might disagree, but the jury actually spoke. I also recall a question the day of the funeral. When he died, I was actually in Jamaica on vacation, so I wasn't seeing much on television. It was amazing, although the people in Colombia, people in Italy, the people in Germany found me, but folks I even work for in this country could not find me, but that's another story. But it was amazing on the day of his funeral. I was asked the question, well, Roland, African Americans were, there was some, they quoted a New York Times story that talked about how black people had issues with Michael and the whole issue of whiteness. I said, whoa. I said, I've been to many a black party in the club. Yeah. I said, and when his music come on, ain't nobody talking about his skin and talking about nothing. All it's about the music. And the reality is when you talk about the legacy of Michael Jackson, it boils down to the music. Yeah. We can talk about trials, we can talk about hair, talk about commercials and all, but it boils down to the music because the music is that's what folks remember. Nobody's talking about Elvis Presley being overweight, shooting TVs, acting a fool, taking pills. They talking about him singing. That's just the some folks still think Elvis is living right now. I keep saying Elvis is kicking it with Tupac right now somewhere. But as we talk about Michael Jackson, we must move forward and do focus on that legacy that folks remember because that's what it speaks to. It's the body of work that speaks to it. And when you talk about the person, we just need to be conscious of the fact that when we sit here and talk about somebody's mama or somebody's daddy and what their family went through, we have to ask ourselves, what have we also gone through in our own families? And but for the grace of God, we are still here and present to talk about it. So I say, Michael, thank God for your daddy and your mama. And for the children, the person said it, we miss our father, he's gone. And we should recognize that that was a son, that was a genius, but there also were people who were in his life who brought out that genius. And as black folks, with 70% of our kids being raised, born out of wedlock, I think for me as a person who believes in authentic manhood, I will always appreciate a daddy because mine has been there 41 years and I will always celebrate that. And I will never disrespect a black man who raised his children and never left.
Thank you all very much. I want to acknowledge my colleagues, Congresswoman Yvette Clarke and Congresswoman Diane Watson. You all have been very gracious. Thank you all very much. God bless you. God bless America. And God bless this effort.
We're not finished. We're not finished. All right, hold on. We're not done yet. I know it feels like the early Destiny's Child, people coming in, leaving, coming in, leaving. But we're going to take audience questions now. So please come to the mic. And let's engage. Let's dialogue.
For 20 minutes. 15, 20 minutes.
I'm Reverend Elijah Hill, President of the National African American Museum of Religions Online. I wanted to look at the, first I'm going to make a statement. Charles Carlyle wrote a book in the 1800s called The Tailor Being Retailored, and he talked about the messenger being the prophet, the poet, and the priest. So I feel like, Michael was a social commentator in the latter part of his life, and he really penetrated and transcended a lot of social messages that were part of the poison of our own society, whether it was man in the mirror, whether it was environmentalism, and on and on. So my question to the panel is that his legacy, was this message that was transcending on a global level that really penetrated a lot of our social ills, whether it was racism, through Man in the Mirror, whether it was on and on, other musical pieces. Was that part of his legacy?
Well, first of all, when you talk about legacy, individuals identify legacy for their own purpose. Some folks will say the legacy is Billie Jean. Some folks will say Man in the Mirror. Some people will say another song. Some will say it's Black or White. And so it's really the totality of of what they presented. I mean, we talk about Marvin Gaye, people talk about him singing What's Going On, talk about Inner City Blues, but they also talk about sexual healing. And so it really depends on, on the individual. I really believe how you define legacy for any artist, it really boils down to, will they be still playing your music in the public space 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now? When we talk about black folks, I make the point all the time that more than likely 20 years from 30 years from now, when black folks get together for family picnics, it's a good bet we'll still be playing Earth, Wind and Fire, still playing The Temptations, still playing Al Green, and more than likely we're going to skip over anything from 1985 to 1995. I'm just saying. But again, but really, that's really how legacy is defined, how the individual sees that music and the impact it had on them.
And also what he's touching on was the deep humanity that Michael brought out in his music. I mean, the Man in the Mirror song is so much about being a good person and self-responsibility. Black or white, he's talking a very early era, very early moment about interracial acceptance. So this is not just a person who's talking about singing and dancing. He's doing that at an ecstatic level, but also about human issues. But even with Off the Wall, he's talking about dancing, but as a way of escaping your human trappings and your troubles. So it's a very bluesy approach to being in the club. So it's not just, you can find me in the club, with my homies, if you want to come shoot me in the club, I'm 50 Cent, I'm here. It's this, I'm going to transcend my day, the travel, the problems and the troubles of my day through dance, and it's an amazing message. Sir.
I think, I want to just, I want to add a piece to that. I think it was also the art of the music for him. I think it was his style, how he approached entertainment. One name that didn't come up, surprisingly, was Sammy Davis Jr.
Yes.
And it was kind of like he was his generation's Sammy to the next level, given the media that we had available. But I also don't think it was just about the music and the art. I think it was also, for Michael, the business of music. And I think one of his legacies shouldn't get lost in that Michael Jackson had the foresight and the vision to buy the catalog of the Beatles catalog.
Yes.
Michael Jackson purchased property all over. Michael Jackson was an investor, and he wanted to live that way. Just knowing him, he wanted to make sure that all people around the world, particularly young people, can see in him that they can achieve any and everything, that they shouldn't be limited by any boundaries. And one of the problems that people had when dealing with Michael was that, we place barriers often on how we see the world and what we think we can accomplish. So if we're in this room, many of us may not see beyond that ceiling. Michael wasn't a guy that just looked beyond the ceiling. He looked beyond the clouds. Michael had this intergalactic vision that was just like interplanetary. So, you would be talking about something, he'd be saying, no, that's not quite what I mean. I mean, we have to be able to make everything change by everything that we do. And so his legacy was about being bold and creative enough to achieve anything and everything. And he will clearly state how he felt about Joe Jackson. And so I share Brother Roland's view. We all have our families. We, often go up and down. But he spoke clearly for himself. He wrote his credits for himself. And I would invite you to take a look at those credits. But if you don't have the time, I will just tell you, he thanked Joe Jackson, his father, with love. And they had a relationship that we will never know, just as if we have complicated relationships. But at the end of the day, it still was father and son.
You touch on the Beatles piece, which is really important, not just financially, but symbolically. I mean, 130 years after the end of slavery, he owns the biggest group that preceded him in history.
Well, DeRay, that's why it's no accident, in my view, what this struggle is all about now and what we've been fighting about. In many ways, folks thought that the biggest fight would be about the custody of the children. For those who are observant, you notice that that was handled very prudently and very swiftly, with care and honor. But it's that business and it's that estate. It's the colonization of our resources that continues to be a challenge for us. And although they say it's a free market, free enterprise, and a meritocracy, when we follow those ideals and we excel, rules either get changed or laws that are on the books are often used and interpreted to undermine the basic truths we were taught in the first place. That's why it's very important that we don't allow that to happen. And I challenge all of us that are here, and I challenge particularly our lawyers and our people in the community. It's not just good enough for us to go to law school, go to professional school, have a degree, and put a credential on our mantle. We're charged to use that expertise and knowledge in a way to protect the power within us and in our community. And we could use all the help and we can use all the support. So please support this mother, support this family as you have. We have been fueled by your prayers, and we're almost home. We're almost there. For those, again, who've been observing, we're very close to resolving the outstanding case around this estate with your help and prayers. But when a man, Michael Jackson, who comes from the diaspora of black folk, will go out and purchase arguably the most precious musical asset of European descent, it creates a very interesting historical paradigm that should, quite frankly, be celebrated by all people of color, including white folk. But let's not be delusional. I will say, you know, as Brother Cornel West has written, and I'm not a politician, so I can say it has always, and it does, and it will always, race will matter. Thank you.
Yes, yes. You know, it's a funny lead-in to what I'm about to say, because I wanted to mention one of my favorite books I've read in my lifetime is Race Matters by Cornel West. I recommend everybody picking that up. I actually just graduated from law school, took the New York bar exam, and I'm also an up-and-coming singer-songwriter in talks with J Records. And I wanted to get what can emerging artists learn from Michael, the business person?
I'll take a quick stab at it, Deb. I think maybe you can talk about. I think what emerging artists can learn as Michael as a business person is like any product. If we're business people, we have to understand what our product is and what our service is, and you have to perfect that product. And Michael understood his gift, which was his product, and he perfected it, and he always worked at it. And in some ways, just knowing him, I feel that it was because of such perfect product that haunted him in many ways of trying to achieve such level of perfection versus understanding that over the course of time, things evolve. So I would say perfect your product, and then I think on a personal level, always read your documents and seek knowledge and understanding from people. And make sure that you get that understanding. And sometimes you need someone watching the someone. The lawyer watch the lawyer, you know, at sometimes. And I think we would learn from Michael those things. Perfect your product, be great, and make sure that you build a good team around you. And I think whether it's for Michael or any of us, I think that those are good lessons for all of us.
That's right.
So I would just add to that you know, Michael's focus was so amazing, and his desire to be the best and to put in the time and effort necessary to do that. And I think that's something that artists can learn from him and to never be happy with where you are, to keep trying to go to that next level. One of my biggest regrets is that we weren't able to see the tour that he had planned. You know, I mean, it would have been amazing to see him make that kind of comeback and to see where he was now in his musical career. And the second thing is control. You know, to always control. I mean, that's a similar theme to what Londell is saying, but to control your product, to be informed, and to stay on top of the business side of things. I mean, it's really important, and you see so many of us, our artists, who have lost that control. And even though they think they may be making enough money at the time, if you don't own your creation, you know, it's not a good situation to be in. It comes back to haunt you. So I think, you know, creative people really have to learn to seek out the best advice and really not trust anyone, to be on top of it yourself and understand the business side of your creation and really control it. Because, you know, the Beatles learned the hard way. They lost control. And it's just real important in years out to keep that control.
You need to be a historian. If you actually go back and read, there's a great piece in Vanity Fair, just go to vanityfair.com, where there was a journalist and she actually interviewed Michael Jackson literally over the last 25, 30 years. When you read these interviews that she did with him in 1972, 1975, you will actually read the things that he did 20 years later. And you will see him talking about the continuum of music over a period of years. You know, as a journalist, for me, in my homes in Texas and Chicago, I literally probably got about 600 some odd books on media. The creation of newspapers and magazines and just all kinds of different things, because you learn from all of that. And so he understood. So when you talk about the issue with the publishing rights, we heard the stories, and I've heard different accounts, that Michael discovered that he actually owned the publishing rights of Little Richard and tried to give him those rights. And so one account that he did, but one account said that Sony said no. And so he understood from day one. Keep in mind when I think it was Reverend Jackson talked about, Dr. Ray talked about being at these different schools. Would I be surprised if Michael Jackson paid very close attention to what took place at Motown and saw what happened with those artists and saw all the different things like that? And so while he thought this little kid was sitting over there in the corner, in that very article, he talked about sitting there, not saying a word, but watching everything around him, watching how Stevie Wonder put together the entire product, but watching how costumes were created, watching how, that's why when you read the accounts of when he went on tour, how he said, no, it would be done this way and this way and this way. The whole notion of the gloves and everything like that. He knew at every step of the way what was going to push the marketplace and what was going to further develop his brand. He was fully aware of brand awareness, and anybody who's in music or even in business, I mean, Deborah will tell you, there is nothing more important than the brand, and you have to build the brand.
And the last thing I want to say, just as a lawyer that, see new artists often and have been blessed to have worked with the great ones from Michael, Stevie Wonder, and Prince, for example, you see the great ones, even Kanye, notwithstanding his antics recently. But you see the great ones and those who want to put in the work to be great. And you see those who want the quick fix. I mean, just look at that silhouette. Look at Michael. I mean, that just says, I'm fabulous. And if there's one lesson beyond just business that I think we can take from Michael, that I wish we could plant in the seed of every young child of our community, and that is, I am fabulous, I am great, I'm going to work and show you all, so just watch me. So that's what I would say, about Michael's legacy.
Thank you very much.
I come here on a different mission, just to let you know that my name is Bill Silverby Richards. I worked with Congressman Stokes 16 years as the entertainment chairman for the great state of Ohio and helped bring the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame to Cleveland. Michael had a concern about entertainers in drugs. 1988, he came to Cleveland.
Sure. Yeah.
And I met with him because I deal with entertainers in the city of Cleveland. And he wanted the message about treatment for young people is getting their entertainment and prevention. His father, going back to what you said, which was great, because I worked with Joe Jackson. He was a board member of a group called Touch, Jerome Gardner, and John Wilson. You know what I'm talking about.
Yes, sir.
John Wilson's my god brother. And Joe is an honorary member of the Teen Center, East Cleveland Neighborhood Center, on the same time that he said that the first time somebody honored him was in Ohio for the Say No to Drugs program. So there is that community of spirituality is there. We had the birthday party in Chicago with John Marshall. Many of you know about that, if you know the mix. And we still talk about bringing people to the awareness of prevention of drugs and entertainment. So let's not forget to give the message about saying no to drugs to the young entertainers, because those are friends of Michael that he watched grow up.
That's right.
Marvin Gaye and those people. So let's keep that hope alive with that picture. Okay. And I will let Joe Jackson know, and I'll call John Wilson, who I tried to get you to talk to on the phone, that we appreciate, because we're a family connected. Ravine Entertainment, Blue Star Technology, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yes, sir.
And I want to appreciate that you work with Catherine, because we appreciate that.
Right.
Thanks
Thank you very much.
You.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you. Your question.
Thank you very much. My name is Elijah Joy. I am a vegan chef, and I want to say, this is not my question, but I wanted to say I'm a vegetarian. One of the reasons I'm a vegetarian is because of Michael Jackson and his time of being vegetarian and being influenced a lot by Dick Gregory and his fasting and taking care of his body. I always wanted to be, you know,
So when I started Dick Gregory with a chicken wing, something was going on, huh? I'm just messing with you. I'm messing with you.
Well, we know.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm
I know
just-
Dick
I'm just
Gregory,
messing.
but
Yeah, what about the KFC with Magic? What about that?
well, and that upset me. But you know what? It kept me vegan skinny for a long time because Michael was a reflection, and
Right.
he was a reflection. To me, he sort of was the picture of how black people were doing at the time. And I appreciated his genius in that way. And like I said, I wanted to be Michael Skinny and keep my dancer body. And that's how I heard he did it. And so that's how I did it. Even in spite of the KFC
So, okay, so
stuff.
So what's your question about skinny people?
So, no, but it is about the media. And because there was two things during the funeral that happened on July 7th.
Right.
It seemed like the media couldn't let go of all the bad stuff, even just as you're like, I mean, people are coming in there and the body's about to be brought in there and they're still talking about all the bad stuff. So I'm a big believer in the power of Twitter, because I tweeted Soledad O'Brien because I was like, I'm really sorry. I cannot see a sister go out like this, you know, and just keep harping on the same gibbery jazz that everybody.
So what's the question?
Gibbery jazz that everybody's doing.
jazz.
Need a question. Need a question.
So
because Roland's twittering right this second about
Right.
you.
And
with
I'm
your
about to
gibberish
Twitter.
jazz.
You're asking this damn question.
So what's your question?
No, but with the media, so Michael Jackson healed the world. Next year is the 25th anniversary of the We Are the World concert. So I'm wanting to know if BET or anyone is planning anything commemorating Michael Jackson's gift to that whole legacy next year.
Great.
That's
the question. All right.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
Vegan chef.
Glad we got there. So we have. We have some things planned in the work in terms of continuing tributes to Michael Jackson, but we haven't talked about that particular event particularly. But thank you for pointing that out. There you go. All right.
To you, sir.
And she also not going to talk about it. That's a business decision.
I just want to make it a little brief, and I'm here basically just to make a little compliment to everybody.
Okay.
I'm here representing UDC, and I just want to say to everybody that.
Thank you, bro.
You're welcome.
Thanks for that's UDC in the house. They was very helpful and supportive. Thanks to them.
I was just gonna say, I'm originally from Guatemala, Central America, and me myself, when I was young, and I was there. I heard when Michael Jackson came out, completely, believe me, everybody just went nuts, you know, about Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson, his dance skills, the way he sung and everything. I just want to let you know how influential music can be and how his music brought people together, and it still brings people together. and his love, anything about his music. His music was, to me, was a message given across for us to understand one another. His love in his music is just incredible. And
do you have a question?
yeah, I would just that was everything I wanted to
he
say.
was just going to make a comment. Thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, thank you.
Nice. You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
You know, as we have this last question.
You have a question?
Yes, sir.
All right.
My question has to do with the catalog of Michael Jackson. That catalog didn't just include the Beatles, but Elvis, Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
I wanted to know, did Sony make attempts to try to get that catalog back? And then was that part of the controversy that Michael had with Tommy Mottola in the early 2001, 2002? And was there a moral clause in the catalog that related to the charges of Michael Jackson?
What was the clause you referred to? What is that?
A moral clause?
Moral clause. Okay, okay.
Does everybody know what a morals clause is, first of all?
If you in
Okay, let me
television and
explain that
radio,
real
you
quick.
know.
You want to explain it, brother? Tell them what a moral
Just like
clause is.
athletes. Like
Yes,
if
you
an
go.
athlete does something like
Shoot himself in the damn leg with his own gun.
DUI, something
Dumbass.
immoral.
Immoral.
It invalidates the contract.
Exactly. Was that
Interesting.
included in the catalog, and did this relate to the trumped-up charges that they tried to put on Michael Jackson? In terms
How
of
old
the
are you,
child
brother?
abuse?
Because those are very pointed, smart questions. Let's give that brother a hand. How old are you?
This time.
20-something.
Okay.
20-something.
20-something.
He's already lying about
Right,
it.
right.
That's great.
Well, let me say first, I'm proud of you, man. Asking them questions like that.
Oh, no problem.
But with that said, attorneys have what they call attorney-client privileges and codes of ethics.
So he can't answer the question.
And confidentiality. So I will answer what is public, but I just want to let you know certain questions in general, maybe very, very wise questions, but are not permissible amongst counsel to respond.
That's why most politicians are lawyers. I'm just messing. Go ahead.
But
they don't answer
but what I
questions.
can say is that Michael's musical catalog interests were very vast. It didn't include all of the ones that you said, but it included so many more other songwriters that are part of our culture, and as well as part of pop culture in general. The moral clause that you spoke about, no, there's no such moral clause in his agreement. And Michael was a joint venture partner with Sony. Michael gave Sony the initial idea to go into the music publishing business because he had already acquired the catalog of the Beatles in his own right. And then he went to Sony, which was a very, I think, successful label for him, and said, listen, since we're having so much great success with our music recording side, let's go into this business. We can take over the whole world. You know, Michael was like, we can do it. We can do it. Michael had, come on. We can really do it. Michael would get you so motivated in that soft voice of his that you would think that you could accomplish anything. He says, Londell, you just wait. We're going to show him. Right?